Hello and welcome to episode 2 of What Makes This Song Special. A big thanks to everybody who liked and shared and watched last week's part 1 and part 2, which was Queen Too Much Love Will Kill You. I'll leave some links somewhere if you haven't seen them already, and this is the first time you're tuning in. The concept, very quickly, is that I'll talk a little bit about what the song means to me. Songs, I think I said last week, the songs are kind of like the soundtrack to my life, as we all have different songs that mean something to us in our lives. And I talk a little bit every week about a different song, chat about what it makes me think of when I close my eyes and hear the song. Where does it take me to? Where does it take me back to in my life? And then I'll talk a little bit about it musically and maybe a wee story about who wrote the song and who the band were a little bit. And maybe a wee bit of vocal, describing the vocalist in a sort of technical way, but I won't go too deep into that for non-vocalists because that can be a bit boring. I didn't actually do that last week. I meant to do that for Freddie Mercury, my favourite singer, and I kind of got to the editing stage for last week's video and realised that I hadn't spoken at all about his vocal technique. But I will cover at least another couple of Freddie Mercury songs, so I will get to Freddie. He's the greatest ever, so we'll get to him. But today's song is a song called Life Goes On by a sort of 80s hair rock band called Poison, quite different to last week's song. And this will be a wee bit of a strange one for me to cover, because I'm going to do a cover version at the end, and that'll be part 2. So a wee bit different. Last week's was quite true to the original. This week's will be quite different to the original. But yes. So where was I the first time I heard this song? So it would have been 1990, and we'd just moved back. Me and my family had been living in Italy during the 1990 World Cup, which was an unbelievable experience. The greatest World Cup of all time. I don't know if I'm saying that because I'm biased because I was there or because I'm Italian, but it was an amazing World Cup for all you football fans out there. And we'd moved back to Glasgow, and it was the summer, end of the summer, just going back to school to start primary 6. And my cousin came over one Saturday afternoon with this tape, a cassette tape album called Poison, Flesh and Blood. So my cousin Peter, he used to come over quite often at the weekends, and he was great for introducing me to. He was the one that introduced me to Guns N' Roses way back, and gave me this sort of music bug. And then he introduced me to a few other bands, but Bon Jovi, I think, as well. And but Poison, so very, very kind of poodle rock band. They used to wear makeup, heavy makeup, and nail polish and long hair, and kind of looking back, kind of a bizarre bunch of characters, but they wrote some great songs and some amazing guitar solos, which we'll get to in today's chat. So yeah, so it would have been about 1990, and I really wanted this album, but I don't know if I just didn't have the funds or we couldn't find it or whatever, but I really wanted a copy of it. And back then, if you wanted a copy of an album, you couldn't. It wasn't like today with MP3s, and if you wanted a copy of an album, you had to find somebody who had a double cassette player. You had two slots for the cassettes to go in, so you'd put a blank cassette in one side and you would put the recorded cassette in the other side, and you would press play on one, press record at the same time on the other, and you would have to play the whole way through. You would have to play the whole way through the album or the song you were recording. Technically, it was stealing, of course, copyright, but we would often do these things on the double cassette player. So I didn't have a double cassette player. That was considered quite a posh thing to have, but we knew somebody that had one, so we took the cassette over there, got a copy of Poison, Flesh and Blood, and my mum spent the whole night, one night for me, copying the cover art for me on this piece of card. She drew it all out and coloured it all in. It made it look exactly like the original, so I had the original cassette tape. And I remember hearing this album from start to finish. We listened to it and we were just in awe of these guys who could play incredible guitar. And I was only about 9 at the time, so it's not like I really knew much about guitar, but I knew enough to know that the guitar playing was amazing and very difficult and completely out of any league of anything that I could even imagine. When I used to borrow my dad's old 12-string echo guitar and try and play 4 notes at a time. So it was a very cool experience. So but today's story is more about what the song makes me think of now, as opposed to where I was the first time I heard it. So so fast forward a few years, we used to go on these journeys to Italy. We used to go back quite often. We used to, most summers, we would drive over. My nonna and nonno, my grandparents in Italy, when they passed away, they left their house to the family. And because most of my family still live over there, the house just lay empty sort of 11 months of the year until we all descended on it every July or whenever. There's many more stories for other episodes, but so what happened was everybody, school friends and things, they were this is like the 80s and very early 90s, like people didn't go abroad as much for a holiday. Most of my friends in primary school hadn't been out of Scotland or out of Britain. Maybe drive to a caravan park, or a few of them had been on abroad holidays, but most people didn't get to go on holiday, so on an abroad holiday, which was a real privilege for us because we had the house line there. So we used to drive over every year, and it was a massive drive. Obviously, me and my 2 brothers would be in the back, mum and dad in the front, and we would listen to Roald Dahl audiobooks, and eventually would maybe get a Game Boy or a Game Gear and sit and play computer games in the back and read books and comics. And but it was a long journey. We'd stop off in places in Germany and stop off for fresh bread in France, and it was a really cool experience, amazing experience. And we would really enjoy all the different parts of the journey, although the car journey was tiring. I feel bad saying that because it wasn't us driving, we were just sitting in the back, but it was tiring. We'd go for a sleep and wake up and argue and debate. And anyway, so eventually what happened was friends wanted to come, like school friends. When we got a wee bit older, we had some school friends that wanted to come and along for the ride to see what this amazing place was like, because we talked about this place, Villa Latina, all the time. This village my dad's from, it's incredible, you need to come and see it. So a few people came over the years, but so this story is more about one certain person who came. So my friend Paul Healy, he became a real lover of the journeys and the village, and he came a few times, and I can't remember exactly which holiday this was, or if it's just an amalgamation of all of them, because the song kind of reminds me of the car journeys. What would happen is, in the car, as I said, it could be a bit tedious in the back of the car, so we'd be looking for things to occupy our minds, and Paul was always very funny, so he would always do impressions. He would do impressions of Steve Irwin, and he would use like a school tie as a prop for a snake. He would do impressions of Michael Jackson that would have us all laughing, and then he would do impressions of my dad. While my dad was driving the car, he would do impressions of my dad's Italian accent, and make us all laugh. And then we would put on music. We would put on songs by usually 80s rock bands back then, Queen and Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, Aerosmith, Poison, various others, and we would debate about what was the best song, who were the best band. We would put together like a super band. Who would you pick for the singer out of all our bands? Who would you pick as the guitarist? And we would debate about what the best guitar solo was. This was a debate that came up all the time. We would sit and argue in the back about which was the best guitar solo. And this song came up often as the best guitar solo. I think that was my argument. And and I think one of the greatest guitar solos ever. So something that's lacking, I think, now, because any song you hear now on the radio, not that I pay much attention to listening to songs on the radio anymore because they're usually dreadful, but anytime you do hear a song from start to finish on the radio, there's no guitar solo, there's no I don't know, there's no fun. The guitar solo used to be a way of the guitarist in the band sort of taking the spotlight off the singer for 30 seconds and showing off a little bit, and it was a way of sort of almost illustrating the emotion of the track as well. The guitar solo would do something either flamboyant or moving, like to illustrate the lyrics in the song. And so yeah, I love a guitar solo. They're very lacking in today's music. So we would always have these debates. I think the song now sort of reminds me of those holidays and driving into Villa Latina. It's a very small village. It's in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, a wee valley in the mountains, and everybody would know we'd arrived very soon after we had arrived. I think one from the noise, and yeah, I think it's just a small village. Everybody talks, and there was one year we arrived, and because the house is uninhabited for about 11 months of the year, the first few hours of the first day of the holiday was always my mum and dad going round decobwebbing everything, cleaning everything, mopping all the floors, getting rid of the dust, and making it habitable for us for a couple of weeks for a holiday. And so me and the boys, my brothers and Paul, we kind of went off and went on a wee adventure, tried to see if there were any of our old friends out from previous summers, and kicked the ball around. And then I went into my bedroom. In my bedroom, our house in Italy is in it's in the piazza, the kind of the main square of the town. That makes it sound like it's a busy, bustling place, but it's as I said, a tiny town, so it's not really very busy. But in the mornings, the town hall and the church are right next to our house, so most of the day it's quiet and deserted, but in the mornings it can be a wee bit busier. So there's a few cars and a few people walking in and out of the town hall for various documents and things, and people get into church. And so I open the windows to look onto the piazza, and there are two windows. I open the first one and it opens fine. I open the second one, but it doesn't quite open, and I realise that behind the window there's a huge sort of mountain wasp nest, these huge big long mountain wasps that you get over there, and they'd made this big hard nest right in the corner, the outside of the window, so I couldn't open my window. And of course, being young and being an idiot, I thought, do you know what, this will be a great fun experience, a great adventure. We got like a broomstick, and we started to poke this wasp's nest with a broomstick to try and knock it off the wall so I could open the window up. And of course, all of a sudden some wasps fly out. Now, this is before the days of YouTube, and I feel like kids these days have seen everything, so they would know, don't mess with a wasp. We probably should have known as well, but I think it's more likely now that people have seen in the movies, like somebody poking a wasp nest and thousands of wasps flying out. I thought in my head, in my naivety, I think I probably thought, there's probably about 20 to 30 wasps living in there. We can sort of take care of them. But of course, loads of them start coming out, and I thought, this is a bit of a dangerous mission. And so my brothers and Paul, we all got sort of involved, and we were getting nowhere. So I had this amazing idea. We travelled through Germany, and I had a can of what we would call Lynx Africa in Britain. I don't know what it is in other places in the world. Lynx Africa is like a spray on deodorant, a deodorant spray. In Germany it was called Axe. It was always like AXE instead of Lynx. They called it Axe. So in Europe you would always get a can of Axe. It was the same thing, but different brand name. So I had a can of Axe Africa from Germany, from Lidl, and a lighter, and I thought, this is a great idea. we'll just build a wee flamethrower and we'll try and get these wasps down. So we start to try and flame these wasps out. And again, terrible idea. And within a few seconds, there are just wasps flying everywhere. But fortunately, they're not coming towards us because we've got like the flamethrower. So they're all kind of heading away from the heat and the fire back into the street, into the piazza. And then we hear some like screams and people shouting down below because obviously there are thousands of wasps flying around above their heads. And by this point, we're getting quite scared. So we you know, as bad as this sounds, we needed obviously to get rid of the wasp's nest. So we go back to the stick after using the flamethrower. We get the stick and we sort of thump at it until it falls, and it fell right into the piazza, and underneath everybody's screaming and shouting because it had landed just beside somebody's car as they were coming out of the town hall. And so we just close the windows and run off and hide somewhere, hoping we don't get caught. And we thought we hadn't got caught, I think, for a couple of hours, and then I think later on that day, one of my dad's old friends from school who works in the town hall. That's the problem with these villages. Everybody knows everybody. You never get away with anything. He'd met my dad and he just said, "Oh yeah, we gathered. We heard the Frankies were back." So there was always some drama when we came. It was always that, or they just heard the music blaring from the car as we drove back through the town to get to our house. But everybody always knew we were back. And the minute they knew we were back, all the people who lived in the village, all the older ladies and men, they would bring bottles of homemade wine from mum and dad, and bottles of olive oil, bottles of passata, eggs from their chickens, vegetables that they'd grown in their gardens, and it would just look like you'd been for a massive weekly shop all over the front of the doorstep. People would come and bring things. It was so kind. And so I think the song Life Goes On always reminds me of those journeys in the car, arguing about guitar solos with my brothers and Paul, and then getting to just our arrival in Villa Latina for the first day of the holiday, and always doing something daft on the first day just to sort of say, you know, we're back, we're home. So that's the wee story. That's what it reminds me of. If I close my eyes and listen to the song, I always think of the car journeys, driving through France, Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, all the way through Italy, and listening to music and driving my mum and dad bonkers in the front. So a little bit about the song. The song was released, I think, in 1990. So when I first heard it, it must have just come out, and obviously already been into Guns N' Roses and Bon Jovi. It was in that genre of music that I'd kind of fallen in love with at that point in my life. I did move on to other things. Don't worry, I feel like I don't want everybody thinking this is an 80s rock only channel. It's not so much like that. But that is what that was my first love. So the song's about so the guitarist in Poison was called C.C. DeVille. I don't think that was his real name, but I think he wrote the song, and a sad story because he actually lost his girlfriend, gets shot and killed in a bar fight in California, I think. And the guitar solo for me, obviously he wrote the song about her life goes on and sort of trying to come to terms with her death. And the guitar solo is the point in the song where he has a chance to, you know, sort of cry almost. It sounds like somebody crying, the guitar solo. It's an incredible solo. And unfortunately, because I'm doing, you know, a piano cover of this, even if I was to do a guitar cover, I can't play a guitar solo like that and do a vocal. You know, it's just not gonna work. It's an unplugged version, and I can't play guitar like C.C. DeVille, unfortunately, either. But mine will not have the guitar solo, and unfortunately the guitar solo is the best bit of the song. So as much as I want you to listen to my version in part 2, I do also want you to listen to the song. Whether you hate cheesy 80s rock or not, have a listen to Poison, Life Goes On YouTube or whatever you listen to your music on. But it's the guitar solo is incredible, really incredible. The band were always they were slagged off a little bit because they were I think they wanted to be like a rock band like some of the other great 80s rock bands on the scene at the time. And I think they always fell into sort of the soft rock category. And I think a lot of that's probably getting onto the vocalist. So the singer was called Bret Michaels. Bret Michaels had a really, really nice voice, but he didn't have the vocal prowess or the vocal range of a Steve Perry or a Steven Tyler or a John Bon Jovi, or a Freddie Mercury, or any of these guys. These guys all had big, powerful, huge range voices. Bret Michaels' voice is more of a kind of almost like a country singer, country folk singer voice, which makes it really nice, really listenable. Uses a lot of twang, like a lot of country singers do. A lot of singers from just south of the US have got that twang, and a wee bit of nasality. And a lot of that comes from quite a lot of compression in the chords coming really close together when you're singing. So he uses quite a lot of compression, a lot of nasality, and a lot of twang mode. And it's a nice voice, but it's not, as I say, it's not one of those big, meaty 80s rock voices. And the music was quite big and meaty in 80s rock, so I think they probably they didn't always get categorised with the rest of them because of that. But I think it worked. I think it worked for them. I can't imagine somebody else singing those songs in the same way as Bret. So yeah, a little bit about Bret's voice. I won't go into too much detail for the vocal geeks only. So that's a little bit about the song. That's the story. A little bit about the band, and what it makes me think of. So that's today's episode. If you liked it, please leave a wee comment. If you like the song, tell me why the song's special to you. What does it remind you of? Tell me in the comments. What does it make you think of? What part of your life does Life Goes On by Poison take you to? And remember to click for part 2, which will come up at the end screen. And you can hear my cover version of it without the guitar solo. Thanks so much.